Hello and welcome to this session. I am so excited to be able to share with you how in times of crisis, sometimes where things don't seem to be going well, how we can use AI to literally change the world. I am Noelle Silver, and it is my honor and privilege to be able to be with you during this incredible event. Thanks so much to those who are involved in creating and preparing this event. I just love it when we can get together, even if it's virtually, to chat about ways that we can make an impact and how we can use technology to help us do that. So first, just a quick introduction of me. If you don't know me, hopefully by this time next year, you were like, remember when we met at the virtual event, and you'll connect with me online and through our really cool app that we have. But until then, I wanted to share with you a little bit about my history in case you don't know. Right now, I am actually working as the head of instruction for a company called HackerU, and we focus on creating educational programs for major universities across the United States. And my focus is on data science and analytics, as well as full stack web development, including the use of artificial intelligence like Alexa. I would love to see a world where every web developer knows how to build Alexa skills, but that they also know how to leverage other AI models. I'm also the co-founder of a company called Thrive Tech. We have a blog called Teching While Brown, which is just a way for me to share some of my experiences with being a minority and a female in technology. Maybe you'll find it fun if you want to check it out. But for the most part, I've spent the last 6 years in the voice industry. I started off on Alexa. I built a bunch of skills for Alexa. Some of them became very popular, and I've been around this industry ever since. I then went to Microsoft and had a really interesting time working with a bunch of different AI models, things that weren't just your traditional voice models, but what about when other visual components start to be added in? You'll also notice here, I always like to show on the slide my family and why I do what I do. These are my wonderful children. I have 4 of them. My dad also lives with me, and he is, unfortunately, he's got some cognitive issues now after he suffered a major accident a few years ago. And so he can't use software in the typical way. It's really spawned my interest and excitement about building a world that was accessible to him. My son, who's 15, he also, he has Down syndrome and also has some limitations into how he can interact with the world. And so I became very passionate about accessibility for both of these audiences. Last year was a pretty fun year. I had the ability to really work on and develop so many different types of experiences. One of which was working with Microsoft. I got an award for creating clarity, and you'll see there's like a ninja cat. Yes, that indeed is a ninja cat right there in the middle of the screen. I also was given an award at the first Alexa conference that now maybe is Project Voice for being the executive of the year. Voice AI decided that, hey, you know what, Noelle, you talk about this so much, you should be one of our influencers. But one of my pride and joy, one of the most proud moments was when VentureBee recognized me for my role in AI mentorship for women in the industry. And I really do try to focus on that. How can I help more women be successful and find themselves happy and fulfilled in a work in technology, specifically in artificial intelligence? So it was a fun year, and hopefully now you feel like you know a little bit about me, and I want to share with you some things that I'm really passionate about. But before I do that, I always like to share this quote because it sets the stage for what we're going to talk about today. And this quote was actually it was introduced to me by a bunch of different CEOs. I saw like the CEO at IBM at the time. I then saw the CEO at Red Hat, at Amazon, Jeff Bezos. They all like messaged it or tweeted about it or sent it in an email. And I was like, oh, it's interesting. So I want to read it to you and you can read along with me. What is success? To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics, and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate the beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child or a garden patch or a redeemed social condition, to know that even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. This is to have succeeded. I think this is so interesting because so many technical leaders in this world use this as their bar. And I thought that was really meaningful because thank goodness, right? I feel much more comforted that we realize that success is not about a product and it's not about a number. It is about people. And you'll notice here, Ralph Waldo Emerson was actually made this popular. He popularized this quote, but it was actually written by a female poet named Bessie Anderson Stanley. And I always like to just give her a little shout out and thank her for this because it really helps me understand why I'm so passionate about using technology for good, and how I can help you do the same thing. So we have more power than ever. And when I say that, what that means is that more technology is available to people with not necessarily extreme amount of technical skills. More technology is available than ever. You can do things without writing any code at all these days. You can build mobile apps without writing a line of code. You can build voice applications for Alexa without writing code. We have more power than ever. But I always like to remind us of something that maybe you've heard before, another quote. With great power comes, hopefully in your mind, you heard great responsibility from Uncle Ben in Spider-Man, right? With great power comes great responsibility. We have all this technology. We have all this capability. How do we use it for good? What can we do with it? So I want to share with you some ideas about what you can do to make a difference in this time right now. So AI is a big part of that. I think it helps us do a lot of different things. Most importantly, it is extremely impactful, allowing us to do things faster than we ever thought possible. So now an idea that you had, if you had that idea 20 years ago, there might not have been technology to implement it. There might not have been an infrastructure to support it. There was just so many roadblocks. But today, usually when someone presents an idea to me, the tech is already there. It's literally waiting for us, the dreamers, the idea creators, to come up with the idea and then do it, build it. The technology is already available. And so what I want to do is open your eyes to that technology that's available, let you see all the different things that you can do. And then my hope is that by the end of this, you will feel like your idea, whatever that content is, whatever that creative idea is, or whatever application you want to build, you'll realize how much easier it is to build now that this democratized technology is available. So the first thing I want to share with you is this concept of open data sets. Now, open data sets for an engineer, what that means is that there is information out there today that these data sets, and what a data set is literally you can think of it like a bucket full of information. And that information can then be used by you to create solutions. So imagine it, for example, some of us got very interested in all the challenges of what was going on with COVID when it first came out, COVID-19. And we were like, oh my goodness, let's see some data on who's getting sick and who's getting really sick. Who's getting tested? What are the results of those tests? And so all of this data was being collected. And now with some of these AI models that I'm going to show you, we can actually use that data to make better decisions about how much testing equipment to order, how hard certain hospitals are having to work, how hard individuals within hospitals have to work. So these open data sets give us the ability to take massive amounts of data, or maybe even not massive, medium-sized amounts of data, but use that data to create insightful solutions that impact the very people we're trying to help. So I wanted to present with you, to you, some of these data sets. One data set is the one I kind of alluded to, right? If you were in a very specific crisis, a pandemic, you might have some ideas about how we might solve things or how we might visualize this for people to understand. I remember one organization created a visualization, and many people, hundreds of thousands of people, began to rely on that visualization every single day. You might have an idea like this, right? What is that open, what data set could you get your hands on that might help you deliver more value to more people than you ever thought possible? So COVID has its own data set. You could take a look at it. We also have the WHO. I love that because I do like the WHO also. But the World Health Organization has another several collections of data sets that are helpful if we want to really go towards this socioeconomic and health management type of solution. So I wanted to share with you just to give you an idea of some of the data sets that are available. You'll also notice if you don't want to be as prescriptive as like solve a health problem, there are lots of open data sets for many different types of problems. So you might see here, Google's Public Data Explorer. You can see a bunch of data sets that have been given or made available to Google in this repository that you can search through. Amazon has the same thing. They call it RODA, Registry of Open Data on AWS, right? So if depending on the platform, the cloud platform of choice, you have the ability to go in and take a look at data sets that you can use to help solve problems. One of my favorites, and I actually have worked on a project with this data set, which is why I wanted to mention it. You do have the ability to make an impact on this world that is not directly associated with some of these very specific types of data sets in the areas of like world hunger or in the areas of health. You could change the world by just increasing people's understanding of culture, understanding of each other, using data to create a different picture and help people open their awareness, right, to things that are going on in the world. So one of the things or projects that I got to work on last year was a really unique hackathon where we brought together the data scientists and engineers from MIT and brought them into the same room with the curators from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And we did that to celebrate the anniversary of the release of this data set, the open data set. I think they call it open access, right? Open access data set of over 400,000 images of all this different types of art. And so as a result, I ended up building an Alexa skill, and that Alexa skill allowed you to uncover new art. You could just say, hey, what's the art of the day? And it would show you art. But then you could ask questions about the author. And I was always thinking about my son, as he every day would go and maybe do this exercise of seeing what the art is. He could say like, oh, more like that. And that's all he'd have to say to get more stuff like that. Or if he'd say, oh, I like that artist, it would tell him information about that artist, opening up his ability where he can't physically, especially during this pandemic that we're currently in, he can't walk down the halls of the museum right now. We don't even live in New York City, so we couldn't even if we wanted to. So how can we leverage artificial intelligence, natural language technology in order to open the world to people who can't be there in person? And that changes the world just as much, right? It impacts the world just as much. So I wanted to give you an introduction to some of the technology, some of the AI models that are out there. This is specifically derived from Microsoft's cognitive services. However, there are equivalent as well as extensions of these models available at Amazon and AWS, at Google on Google Cloud Platform, at IBM with IBM Watson. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but what I want to do is just encourage you to think about these models, right? And think about how this works. So the first thing you'll see here is vision, right? I came from a world of audio and Alexa, and I grew up kind of in artificial intelligence that was specific to what things sounded like and how I could increase accessibility to something by using speech. But vision became very interesting to me, where I got the ability to go in and now say, well, what about computer vision? How could I use a computer's ability to see an image, to detect information from that image, to be able to pull data from an image, right? Not just images, but handwriting. There's so many different models that in an application, I'll just give you one example, actually. A friend of mine, Brian, gave me this idea a long time ago. But what happens if I decide that I want to create an application that allows me or anyone to ingest all the letters that their grandparents wrote during the World War, right? And back then they only used letters to communicate. So my grandparents, for example, they courted during that time. And so they have this relationship. It's all documented in letters. I have a bunch of pictures of them as they grew up and raised a family. What if I could create a virtual reality experience where I put on a headset, I ingest these letters in, I use OCR technology to read it, I use speech technology to allow it to be spoken to me. I could even create a custom voice that kind of sounds like my grandma and kind of sounds like my grandpa. And now in this virtual environment, I can have a conversation. I can ask my grandmother, who was a nurse. I could be like, hey, you were in a technical field. Like, how did that go? How was your pregnancy? Like, did you get sick all the time like me? Or, what did you do? Like, how was the engagement? When did you find out you were pregnant? Like, all these questions that were actually uncovered in these letters, I now get to have an intimate experience with. Again, that's something that can change the world for people, especially those that don't have a lot of family, or as people, leave or pass away, they have an opportunity to reconnect with them. It's really an interesting idea, an interesting technology. And we can kind of think about it for ourselves, like in the future. I would love for my great-granddaughter to be able to ask me questions about what it was like to be me right now when I'm long gone, right? And so how can I capture the right information, the right data to make sure models like this could use that information and make it available in an application? You can also see things like knowledge, being able to, right? How many of us have a hard drive full of things that we find, after you've owned it for, 6 months, a year? It's very difficult to find things in, right? Wouldn't it be great if I could just use my voice and be like, hey, you remember that presentation I did for that event like 2 years ago? I remember I quoted someone about something, and it being able to find the resource that you need. We're not far from that. As a matter of fact, the technology exists today to create a massive index. It's called cognitive search. And that index can be structured and unstructured data. It can include images. It can include letters. It has so much capability for taking the data we have and turning it into information that we want. And the tech is there. What is missing is our ingenuity as individuals, our ingenuity as developers to create experiences that use that technology successfully. That's a combination of kind of knowledge and search together. But there are so many options, right? I've already talked to you about speech, text to speech, speech to text. That's very similar to what happens with Alexa. But also, what about language? Just sentiment analysis, understanding how people are feeling when they're talking, being able to do just good old contextual analysis, right? Text translation. Oh my goodness, if we could translate every piece of content into languages to create more accessibility to people who don't just know the single language that something is written in, that is the world where more people get educated, more people have access. And in a time of crisis, this is where my head goes, right? How do I make more information available? How do I educate more people so that we can build better solutions? So another area that I wanted to focus on was helping educators create more engaged classrooms. So one of the things that happened, as we're going through this crisis and as all of my 4 children get sent home and we're in quarantine, I just started thinking, man, how do we use the technology we have to build a better classroom experience? This is one thing in this time of crisis that I felt like, man, we could do something about this. So I really started thinking about, obviously, a teacher, by themselves, or even a school system is not going to be able to go in and create code base after code base for all of these different channels, right? For building from nothing, I need developers that are focused on Google and Google Assistant. I need developers focused on Alexa. I need developers who are going to use Slack or Zoom or whatever the case may be. So what I got passionate about was, how do we create more of like a one bot to rule them all kind of implementation? And so what I found was Azure Bot Service, which is cognitive services basically. And it gives us the ability to write the experience, write the context of that experience one time, and then distribute it across a bunch of different channels. The huge benefit to that is that the persistence of the conversation, the state of what you're asking about can be stored in one location. So as you navigate, you can see here from Alexa to Google to to Kik, to Skype, to, to really any platform. As I go into Slack, as I'm navigating and having a conversation across all these different platforms, all the data of that conversation is being stored in one place. So when I go from Alexa and then I end up, at my PC, and I start talking, to my PC should know where I left off, right? If I just said on Alexa in the morning, like, tell me a little bit about my calendar. Oh, I need you to move this around. And then I come to my office, it should know that I made those requests, right? I should be able to pick up right where I left off. And the technology is there to do that, right? Session management and conversational persistence, that's not new tech. But being able to do it across platforms has not been easily demonstrated. And so this diagram that I'm showing you here is how we take all of the work that's being done by, our amazing software engineers in the area of AWS and, if this then that, and in our SQL databases and all of our line of business applications, all of our business apps. How do we expose that work, right? That value? How do we give it to people in a way that is frictionless? And the way that works is by having a single code base and then distributing it across a bunch of different channels. And I'm really passionate about this. I do think it's the future of voice. Right now, we're pretty siloed in our development, right? Some of us are Google Home people and some of us are Alexa people. Some of us are both, but we're still building separate code bases. And so I look forward for the day when we realize that there's huge value in reducing friction, in allowing someone, regardless of the client that they're using, to be able to engage with the technology. The last thing I want to do is talk about just voice enabling the world. In a time of crisis like ours, and in a time where education and really just understanding each other has never been more important, creating accessibility for our technology and for our ability to use that technology is critical. And so I want to talk about how you could go about building a skill. And I've built a bunch of skills. This is going to mimic what I've done to be successful. And I hope that it will encourage you to start today. If you are a blogger, if you're a content creator, a content strategist, or if you are a skill developer, even if you're experienced, some of this information might be useful to you as well. But it talks about, if I want to just get started, maybe you're a podcaster, right? Maybe you're an influencer on LinkedIn, whatever it is. If it requires a screen, there's a new way to think about it, right? A new opportunity. So let's just think about what it would take to build a skill. So the first thing, we call it crawl, or, don't boil the ocean. Figure out, I call it a minimum remarkable product. Figure out a minimum remarkable product, and in that MRP, if you will, find one thing you can do really well. And don't be, or in my mind, I think it's really good to be customer centric, right? Start with the customer and work backwards. And the way that I do that is I look at a successful, like if you're a podcaster, look at your successful podcast and start with the most successful one. If you're a website though, like a bank, go to your bank's click trails on your website. What are people trying to access the most? What are they trying to do every single day? And then cross-reference that with what takes them the longest number of clicks to do, right? So most commonly requested function takes them the longest time to do it. Prime opportunity for creating a voice command for that. And start there, start small, start with one thing and build trust with your audience. Once you have that, you can extend on the capabilities, but start with one thing and something they already want to do. Don't start with something super, sure, start with innovation and something cool that they never thought they'd do. But a lot of people coming to the voice platform as a customer, this is not native to them, right? They're not bleeding edge people. They're like my dad, who just wants to know an easier way to do something he would have done anyway, but would have struggled on a screen to find it. So build something simple, a minimum remarkable product, and then move towards extending that once you've built your community of users and you've built trust with that community. Once that is done and you've created some functionality, now you can do what you want, right? Now that you've built, you can create fun things. You can build a beta program. You can do all of these really interesting things that often are things we want to do first. You can wait until you have a community of users that knows, likes, and trusts you. And then you can start adding fun things that they'd be happy to help you develop. But the number one thing I think is starting with that customer-centric focus, right? Starting at the customer's experience and working your way back. Do some data digging, find out what they want to do, and make it easier for them to do that. And focus on just one thing and evolve from there. So I added, you will probably get access to this script or whatever, and I added some examples just so you can get an idea if you're ever reading this slide deck later. So some of us are coders, some of us aren't. And I want you to know that building Alexa skills is actually available regardless. The first one, no code development. Go to Alexa Blueprints. There are so many. It's actually alexablueprints.amazon.com. But if you head on over to the Alexa Blueprints, you will see dozens of different blueprints for skills. It's not the tech that's hard, it's the idea. It's creating some minimum remarkable product. So start there. And it's really a great way to get engaged. If you've never been involved in voice tech, if you've never built a skill before, this is a great way to get started. However, if you are a dev, if you are familiar with Node.js or Java or Python and you want to jump right in and get familiar with the APIs, you can head right over to the developer console, which is developer.amazon.com. There's a place for everyone. The most important thing this world needs in this type of crisis is your ideas. And we want to make it frictionless as an industry for you to take those ideas and make them a reality and make them accessible, make the solutions accessible to as many people as possible. People that hear well, people that don't hear well, people that see well, people that don't see well, people that are introverts and extroverts, people that have special needs and don't, people that are older and younger. Our job is to create software, create solutions that help everyone. And couldn't be a better time. The technology is available at your fingertips to be able to take advantage of it. So if you've ever had an idea you want to implement, now is your chance to get it started and actually develop a user base that will follow you and support you in that effort. So this brings me to a close. I hope you've enjoyed the session today. Open data sets, create a simple interface for multiple channels to communicate via natural language. That's this bot idea, right? Using Azure Bot Service as an example. And then also building a skill and having this concept of start small and build, create a group of users that know, like, and trust you and work through that trust to build something even more meaningful for the world. I hope you've appreciated and learned something today, and it has been my honor to be here with you. Thank you so much. You'll notice here you can connect with me on Twitter. I am always on Twitter. You can also find me on LinkedIn. And yeah, I look forward to meeting you. It's been really a pleasure chatting. And any questions, just let me know. I'm always available on these channels to help. Thanks so much. Bye.